Hi, I'm Rob Deb, and welcome to A Book at Deb Time, a new series where I just try to abbreviate a paperback classic for you in about 10 minutes to save you the actual reading of words. Just a bit of context here. I'll be looking at genre books throughout this series for a number of reasons, not least of which this is not a problem. This is Frankly, I've got a year, or rather what's left of this year, try and read through these books which I've promised myself I'd get around to because I'm pushing 50 and I understand managing expectations in life. Now, we're going to start with this one, Squirm, Richard Curtis. God, I hope it is. A novelization adaptation of a film from 1976. Best way to describe it was the night of the crawling terror. Graham bod-curdling shocker. A sleepy southern town doesn't know what hits it. In short, this is slugs, but America and shit. Um, it is part of that subgenre of what if animals go wild. The film itself, made in 1976, never seen it myself personally. This book has been reprinted 4 times, and I, for the life of me, can't really understand why. But then again, I haven't read enough books from 1976. This is not Slugs. This is certainly not Attack of the Killer Crabs. You can go and visit a Robert Ince site for that one. When it's covered, there's just absolutely no point. And of course, I did grow up with the seminal classic, The Rats. Squirm itself as a story. It's again, it's a small town. Fly Cop, or whatever the fuck it is a small town with a small town girl, Jerry. Jerry's met mate. Mike's from New York. You know Mike's from New York because he walks into a small town and orders an egg cream, and no one knows what an egg cream is. Ha! What a wanker Mike is. It's a kind of coke float. I had to Google it. Anyway, he buys this egg cream, and it turns out it's got a worm in it. Up to the fact that Jerry is expected in the small town forced marriage way to marry Roger. Roger himself, his father owns a worm farm. Now, for those of you who have never covered science ever, let me truth bomb you with this. Apparently, if you take a field of worms and apply electricity to them, not only will they come up to the surface, they will have a hunger for human flesh. Why? Are they special worms? No. Is there any chemicals involved? No. It is pure electricity. Not only that, but they'll have the ability to leave your skeleton glistening within minutes of meeting you. This doesn't work. This doesn't work. This is not even 70s science. I was born when this was written. I do not believe that people believe that electricity makes man eating worms. What it does, though, is it has a young lady in her 20s going to the shower about 4 times, it not working, and claiming that the worm is going to eat her. Now, this may be why this has been collected about 4 times. Her first appearance, we learn this. Incidentally, while we're dealing with this, the small town girl, the American guy who's come from New York, and egg cream, not even coffee, picking up on a small town sheriff. You also have Roger. Roger is the guy she's going to marry. Roger had a very traumatic experience because his father, who invented blood killing worms 15 years before the story begins, cut off half his thumb. In fact, he had his thumb cut off by his father. That's all you need to know. No, that's not all you need to know. You also need to know that when he gets eaten by worms, he only gets half eaten by worms, becoming a man worm zombie thing. Because again, worms plus electricity equals some sort of bizarre zombie virus. And let's see if I can find the quote here. I did lose the quote for her perky breasts because you don't need that. There's a film. Egg cream. Yes, we've already covered egg cream. And see, this is not really my sort of. This is why I tend to do films. Here we go. The Mikey, you okay? The worm bit me. Jesus Christ. Here we are. Yes, he got them all out of the ground with electricity. He had to cut off most of my thumb to get it off. This is the bit that surprises me. Jerry felt tears springing involuntarily into her eyes. She'd noticed Roger's deformity years ago, of course, but she never had the temerity to ask him how it happened. That's bullshit. That's bullshit. If you turn up at school, this is 15 years, and you're 9 years old and you have half a thumb, every kid's gonna fucking ask you, what the fuck? What the fuck? Right? Incidentally, we also know that Jerry has a perky buttocks and lots of freckles. I used to have freckles. I was beautiful once. But as we move on, he won't have a thumb anymore because he's become man one. Let's see. This is the stuff that actually made it sort of worth trying to pick up here. Um, had Jerry turned around, she would have seen him too, wavering like a scarecrow. Thing was the right word for it, because you could not truly be called a human being, where a face is now a dozen burrows, each as wide as the entry hole of a 38 caliber slug, because you know how big that is. And from out of each the tail of a worm flicked and quivered. The cheeks were furrowed where the worms had insinuated their way under the flesh. Dried blood and gore blotched his face. His eyes stared listlessly out of a mutilated head. I have not seen this film. I do not believe that the budget can live up to that, especially since he is animated and running around the place. You also have some weird moments where, incidentally, while they're trying to fight these worms, of course, electricity. How the fuck do you deal with electricity? Fire. I would say you give me a heap of worms, you get fire. No, Mike knows where there's a Nazi bayonet. In fact, Mike took it and held it respectfully, left palm supporting the heft, right palm the steel blade. He examined it closely. Although, truth to tell, his heart wasn't in it right now, with far more important matters weighing on his mind, like killer worms. The blade was beautifully honed on both cutting edges, and Mike tested the sharpness of the hair on his forearm. The fuck, Mike? Several hairs floated down to the tabletop, testifying to the cleanness of the blade. Mick then hefted the bayonet, balancing it on his index finger. Can I just say that this is the New York guy who drinks egg creams? You had to hand it to the Nazis. They sure did make excellent instruments of war. 1976. You know, don't be stupid, be a smarty. Please avoid the Nazi party. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Incidentally, the worms don't just eat because they're panicking and so on. They now have a hunger for human flesh and they sneak into pipes. This is never fucking explained how they're supposed to be in showers and bathrooms and shit. They all just fucking turn up. Right? I'll give you an example. On her fourth incident going into the shower, um, lovely film shoulders, uh, Jerry then leaves it with her younger sister, who we are not going to add any descriptives to, who just leaves the tap running. Now, being the freckle faced younger sister, brother, in my youth in the 80s, I'm not saying that wouldn't happen, but bear with me with this use of language. They found the showerhead holes. These are the worms that have been waiting now. They found the showerhead holes and squirmed through, wriggling until their tails were clear, now that there was no light. For a moment, they dropped through the space, a detestable experience, because worms have experience. Then they struck the hard, cool porcelain of the bathtub. Shaking off the stunning impact, they tried to crawl up the sides of the tub, lured by the odor of human flesh that pervaded the house. But the walls of the bath were too steep, and they slipped and tumbled back into the floor of the tub. The platoon of worms, because that's what they are, that fell on top of them had better luck. The next wave of worms had even less distance to fall than to crawl. It was as if the massive individuals had but one mind, one will, and one purpose. The tub filled slowly with worms, but for the worms it didn't matter what was time to them. This would later culminate in the worms entirely packing out this room so that when the door opens, they all fall out and devour the younger sister, incidentally. I know. Spoiler alert, what the fuck? They incidentally also fall through a roof and create, again, nice language here. Maybe this is it. Maybe you need a Nazi blade. Because again, Richard Curtis, I really hope it is. Is it raining? I hadn't noticed. Well, Sharon, that's why you're covered in fucking worms. And now like a paratroop invasion. This is them falling from a roof into the now mad mum's knitting chair. Like a paratroop invasion, they began to drop off, landing around her feet and creeping up the legs of the chair. As she started to snip the stand of wool from the finished shawl, her chair seemed to burst into life. She sat in a living chair, the living chair of death. Roger gets eaten by the worms. Mike convinces Jerry to let her mother and her sister just die while brandishing this Nazi bayonet. The sheriff jacks up with a woman of dubious morals, basically a madam, and then gets eaten by them as well. There is no way I would sit through this film. There are some great, nice passages in this, but ultimately, I can see that it's going to be 40 minutes going, where the fuck did that skeleton come from? 3 minutes of being Roger, Roger, and a lot of getting in and out of a shower. Charlie Bond is banned from the comments. The book itself, no, no, this was a trawl. This was an absolute trawl for worms. I would not recommend it. Those few passages I was able to pull out of there uh, really was painful. It was like they had bitten in there, um, less than the sum of its parts. I'm mostly fascinated by the fact that it had four printings, right? This film there's no way that this film has managed to spawn the need for a book that was reprinted in 1976, 78 twice, 79, and 1980 twice. This has been printed 5 times. I really don't know. UK price 85p. Now I feel I have an answer. So there you go. That's the first book at Deb time. I hope you enjoyed it, and there will be more.